Hey YouTube, this is Elk, and today we're doing Ask Reddit Narrated, Episode 5. What's the most fucked up thing someone has told you about themselves after barely getting to know them? I made the unfortunate mistake of inviting my old neighbor over when we were having a party. He had like 5 gins in my kitchen and confessed to an unsolved murder in Nunavut, Canada. He's in jail now. Hitchhiking through New Zealand, I got picked up by a semi-driver. Awesome guy, but an hour into the drive, he started unloading every bit of personal information he could. How he's cheated on his wife, screwed the company out of money, stolen items. It was like I was a priest in a confession booth. When I asked him why he told me all of that, he said it's been eating him up inside for years, and telling me helped get it off his chest. He said I had no idea who he or anyone he knew was, so it felt like I was the perfect person to unload on. Temporary coworker tells me she was kidnapped, raped, and beaten by her ex-husband, burned with cigarettes, hands shoved down the garbage disposal, head beaten with a hammer. The incident resulted in a baby she somehow still has, and they're not even divorced because he won't sign the divorce papers. I work in a small town gas station. I'm trying to check out customers and she's reciting a true crime episode to me. The conversation started with mascara recommendations. It was the craziest thing I've ever heard. Stuck driving a coworker out to a remote gas plant to do a system install. He was kind of fucked up, but I assumed it was just in a socially awkward IT way. Nope. He starts telling me about him and his dad collecting Nazi memorabilia and how proud he was of his German grandparents. Trying to make other small talk, and he would just trail off answering questions and start singing to himself. Thought for sure I'd end up on the news and a manhunt would be conducted. Guy walks into my bar, which is down the street from a hospital. He's pretty quiet, so I'm not trying to push for a conversation. Next thing I know, he breaks down crying at the bar. I go to ask if he's okay, if I need to call him a cab, etc. He told me his teenage son had just died in the hospital down the street about an hour earlier. I had no idea what to say or how to react. In my 3rd year at university, heading home from a late night of studying for midterms, I met a kid crying in one of the stairwells of the university center. I asked him if he was alright and sat down with him. He was a foreign student. His English wasn't strong, but he said his life was over. Family was gonna disown him. He had nowhere to go, etc. So I asked some more questions, and then he came out and said he thinks he's gay. And his parents are from a conservative culture, which says it's not okay. He doesn't know anyone here other than a few ultra-conservative foreign students from his country. And he felt like there was nothing he could do, nowhere he could go, all that. I felt so bad for the guy. He asked if he could hug me, which was a bit awkward, but I said yeah, and held him for a bit. Then we spoke for another 30 minutes, and I told him all about the free counseling options at the school and how nice and understanding they were for my mental issues. Told him that his sexuality wasn't as rare as he thought, and there were plenty of gay people at the school, some of whom felt just like him. I gave him a business card for the counselor I was seeing, gave him my number if he wanted to talk, and headed out. He called me to talk and meet up on campus and thank me a few weeks later, and then I never saw him again. Hope the dude's found comfort in his skin and a happy life in Canada. A guy told me during our first shift that his younger daughter was suicidal. His eldest daughter's boyfriend was terribly abusive, and his wife was sleeping with someone at her work. Apparently, he'd just gotten out of jail after flying home from out of state, beating the shit out of his daughter's boyfriend, his brothers, and his dad, driving to his wife's work and beating the shit out of her boyfriend, then driving to the hospital to hold his daughter's hand, after she had attempted suicide until the cops arrived to arrest him for aggravated assault. She said that if I wanted, she would kill her parents so we can live at her house. I never went on a second date with her. Visited a coffee shop for the first time on holiday. Barista commented on my tattoos. I said thank you. She told me she's not allowed to get tattoos, but she cuts herself to enjoy the pain, and that's nearly the same thing. I found a different coffee shop for the rest of the holiday. I had to pick up a friend of a friend for her job before going to a party. I'd never met her before that night. When I got out of the car at her job site, she came out screaming and running towards me and jumped into my arms like we were longtime friends. This was in Canada, so I shrugged it off as some strange Canadian greeting. We went back to the hotel suite to prepare for the party with a few other people. We were drinking heavily and making small talk when I mentioned I gotta hop in the shower before the party starts. All of a sudden, she sticks her hands in her pants, pulls it out and sniffs it. Making a face, she said, "Yup, I need one too. I'll join you." Before I knew what was happening, she grabbed my arm and was pulling me to the bathroom. Keep in mind, this all happened in front of several people. They knew her, but I didn't, and they were laughing their asses off. Apparently, she had a reputation of being a sort of crazy, free-spirited person. I was too drunk to think about what was happening and was kinda in shock. I didn't know if she was weird or was coming on to me, but I did need to take a shower, so I went along with it. Later that night, we ended up running around Toronto singing and dancing in a drunken mess of a good time. It was certainly the strangest interaction I've had with someone I just met. Also, I'm a guy and there was no sex, just an unexpected and friendly shower with a girl I just met that night. Had to get my picture taken for a visa, so I went to a local photography shop that took the pictures and printed them out for you right there. I had been talking to the guy as he worked on other people's photos, and when I finally got my picture taken, he started opening up about his family. Apparently, his son was killed 3 years ago in a car accident, and he was telling me how much I reminded him of his son, going to school for engineering, first-generation college student, etc. The son was killed in his senior year, so didn't even get to graduate. He even showed me pictures. It was heartbreaking. To make things worse, he said he had a degenerative muscular disease, and doctors had given him about 2 to 3 years before he'd be bedridden. He then went on to say his daughter was taking care of him and deserves to live a young person's life, and man, it really puts into perspective how bad some people have it. I still think about that guy to this day and hope he's doing well. Years ago, I went on a date with a guy I met via AOL Personals. Within 5 minutes of the date, he told me he was working on a book about speed seduction, and he was so confident he could speed seduce me, he already had a condom on, ready for me. I hightailed it out there full speed. I googled him a while back, and it turns out he ended up self-publishing the book. I was a teenager working retail, and there was a fidgety older woman I worked with. I was always very nice to her, but she was just a coworker at the end of the day. One day, she told me about her grandpa molesting her when she was young. Her parents didn't believe her, so it continued until he died. She said she was glad when he died and was happy at his funeral. I really had no clue what to say since this was out of nowhere. I just said I was really sorry it had happened. Felt really bad for her because I could tell it still really bothered her. I was buying an AC at Home Depot during Black Friday sales. There were none on the shelf, so an employee was helping me get the display model. He carried it all the way to the cashier for me. I thanked him and wished him a happy holiday season. A shadow crossed his face, and he looked at me straight in the eye and told me he killed someone a year ago during the holidays. He ran a man over and killed him. It was ruled an accident, but he said he won't ever celebrate a holiday again because of that. I thought the employee was fucking with me. I did some searching online when I got home and found the news article, and he did indeed hit and kill a man. It was a super rainy evening and just starting to get dark. The person killed was heavily intoxicated and veered into the oncoming traffic. Went to pick up food from IHOP one time, and the hostess tells me how her son was killed in a gang shooting and starts crying. I felt bad for her, but it was super awkward. Like, I just wanted my pancakes. When I was around 10, I lived beside this weird family. The little girl was probably 4 or 5, always clinging to me anytime we were outside. She talked incessantly and always wanted to hang out with me, asking to come into my house. She annoyed me so badly, but she was really sweet and excited about everything. One day she told me, "Do you ever naked wrestle with your dad?" I told her that's really weird, and no, I don't even know what that means. She then tells me she and her dad and brother wrestle a lot. Forgive me, but I was 10. I had no idea what the fuck I was being told. I still think about that to this day. The guilt eats at me. I wish I had understood more and told someone. I also had a classmate in high school I'd give rides to and from school, so she wouldn't have to make her dad do it. After we graduated, I saw her working at the mall. She then told me her dad used to molest her, and she was finally able to see a therapist and work through it. When someone says these things happen more often than we realize, they're not wrong. I have had years and years of training on signs of this type of abuse, and it will forever break my heart and make me so angry. It's unfathomable. I had to stay late when I was a manager, as one of the female employees' parents were running late. She broke down to tell me about how she had been sexually abused by her best friend's father, and that he had been doing it to her best friend for years. He was in jail after he did it to her, as she reported him, and sadly the daughter hated her for turning in her father, as she thought it was normal behavior. She had only been working there for a few months at this point, and we had probably only worked together a handful of times, so I really didn't know her that well yet, but I think she just needed someone to know she was struggling with it, and someone to tell her it wasn't her fault, and what he did was wrong. I think it's easier to tell a thing like this to someone you don't know well. I'm good friends with someone now who, at the beginning of our friendship, confided a similar thing to me, and they hadn't told other friends they'd known for much longer. I think there's a bit of safety in the idea that even if they get rejected by this person, at least they didn't know them well, and it's a hell of a thing to hold on to alone, you know? That he broke in and beat the shit out of a guy who raped his daughter, put the guy in the hospital with a baseball bat. I totally get why he did it, but I have no idea why he thought it was a good story to tell a new coworker. Random guy I met at a party back in university told me, after a few beers, that he had killed a kitten by smashing its head with a shovel. I quickly found an excuse to be somewhere else. When I was in rehab, my roommate, who was only 18, told me that she had been stripping and selling herself since she was 11 to get her dope, and that you can connect the dots of the abscess scars on her arm. She'd continually shoot up in a spot till she got an abscess, and then she'd just cut it out of her arm herself. Being an ex-heroin addict myself, abscesses weren't anything new, but the fact that this tiny little 18-year-old girl, she couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds, had 9 abscess scars on just one arm. I just couldn't even wrap my head around that. You hear some of the worst fucking stories ever in rehab, and I've been to 10 during my entire addiction, but this was one of the worst I had ever heard, especially because she was so nice and had such an innocent way about her. It was heartbreaking. That'll conclude today's Ask Reddit episode. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time.